There we go. Right, we're jumping back into this mini series on the Christian journey that I've called "How to Get Where You're Going," and we're about halfway through the content that we'll be using. So we'll do a little bit of review, just because if you're like me, I don't even remember what we talked about. So we'll catch everybody back up before we do new content tonight. Some opening questions here. I'd love for 2 or 3 people to chime in on each one of these 3 questions here, okay? Basically, that means everybody needs to. Okay. So how would you answer these questions as they relate to your journey with Jesus? In this season of my life with Jesus, I am in a place of. Or second, when I think of where I'm headed with Jesus, so future, where I'm headed with Jesus, I'd summarize my destination as, or past. As I look back over my past with Jesus, I can identify these positive or negative milestones. So how about a couple people chiming in on each one of those 3?
Can't you just chime in on one?
I'm saying,
Okay.
yeah. Just a
I
couple
thought you were
people
saying
on
a
each
couple
one.
people
Yeah.
would have to do each. Yeah,
No,
I
no. Sandy
misunderstood.
has volunteered to answer all 3, but everyone else, if you just
I
answer.
will answer the last one. So as I look over my past, I can identify some positive milestones with coming to Stanford. I think that it has made a big difference in my relationship with Jesus and just in my growing. And I think a lot of it is their stance on LGBTQ, but their stance on women. You know, I think I had a lot of anger and resentment that I had repressed over those 2 things, and they were a real hindrance to my relationship with God. And so I think it's been lifted and alleviated. So
Very good. Thank you.
That's kind of you to say, Kendra.
I'll comment on that same one that Kendra did, because definitely moving from Birmingham to Stamford, Connecticut in 1966 was very positive for me. Although probably at the time I was scared to death because I was leaving all my grandparents, all the grandparents that did all the babysitting and everything. But it turned out to be, you know, you never know what you would be like if you were still in that same place. There's no way to know that, but definitely opened me up to all kind of different ideas. You know, like I was in a box kind of, and I felt like it really opened me up. And over the years, not all just at once, definitely starting probably with Ken Durham and then Dale, and then now Chris. And so it's just, that's very positive for me, those milestones.
Thank you, Sylvia.
But Sylvia, I would suggest that your many years here have contributed to making it such a special place.
Well, thank you very much. It is a special place, and I've been so fortunate to call this my church home for all these years, since 1966. So that's a long time.
Good, very good. About question 1 or question 2?
All right, I'll give you all 3.
Okay.
All right. So I'm letting a couple people off the hook, perhaps. In this season of my life with Jesus, I am in a place of struggle. When I think of where I'm headed with Jesus, I'd summarize my destination as unclear.
Hmm.
As I look back over my past with Jesus, I can identify a positive milestone as the same one Kendra did and the same one Sylvia did, as coming to Stanford. And as a gay woman, I'm right on board with Kendra. But it goes far beyond that. It goes well within not as far back as Sylvia, but 25 plus years back of having a very consistent, loving, caring, spiritual, reliable church that I can go to, and when required, sometimes step away and come back and be within the presence of some very loving and beautiful people. So that's a super positive that makes the answers to the first and second questions be okay.
I appreciate your honesty. Yeah, we need to be able to say, I'm in a place of struggle and that my destination is unclear. Right? We need the freedom to say that. Thank you, Annie.
Thank you.
About one more.
I could try question number 2, and I'd summarize my destination as only just begun. And what I'm trying to say by that is that it's looking forward. It's good to have the past, but it's the moments that are in front of you or in front of us or in front of me that are important. So the destination is only just begun.
I don't think it's open yet.
Those of us of a certain age are now thinking of a Karen Carpenter song. You know who Karen Carpenter is? We've only just begun.
My high school graduation song.
Okay, good. So these questions get us thinking about our life with Jesus as a journey. And
like that.
I did my best.
You can do better.
So these are the kind of questions that we are addressing in this mini series. If you pictured your life in Christ as a journey, how would you describe the stages or steps? How would you know what's normal and not? How would you, left you out of all those. How would you make meaning out of what's past and prepare for what's to come? How would you know what really matters and what doesn't? And how would you describe the goal? So all of those related questions are sort of being touched on in this series. So they're big picture questions. They get lost in the trees of day-to-day life, but they're very important questions. So where we've been for the last few weeks together is in content from a book called The Critical Journey by 2 authors, Hagberg and Gulick. And they describe our journey as 6 stages and a wall. So we've gone through stages 1 through 4 and the wall. And I've kind of summarized their model in this way. So stage 1, what they call recognition of God, is hello. It's the initial formation of a relationship with God. Stage 2 is I know, what they call life of discipleship. So this is when we learn basic doctrine and discipleship. Stage 3, which they call the productive life, is I can, where we're engaging in ministry and service, probably for the first time. Stage 4, they call the journey inward, which I've just used the phrase, I wonder. So this is when we begin to question what we've learned and experienced in stages 1, 2, and 3. And then we hit a wall where we might say, I don't know anything, or I can't do anything. In other words, there's a faith crisis. And of course, there are many walls that we hit in our journey. And then on to stage 5, and 6, which we'll talk about tonight briefly. Stage 5, which they call the journey outward. So we're now leaving the wall, and we might use this phrase, I know some things. So this is that stage in our journey where we begin to gain clarity about what we do know and what we don't know. And then stage 6, which is the destination in this model, where we are trying to get to, which is a life of love, where we might use the phrase, well, I can love. You know, we recognize our limits in terms of our knowledge and our experience and our capabilities, and we find contentment in realizing, well, at the very least, I know that I can love, and I'm finally realizing the priority that love has in this journey. And then we'll introduce tonight another way of thinking about the journey, which comes from Henry Nouwen, which focuses on sort of long-term tensions or struggles that are almost a constant part of our journey with Jesus. So think about this question here. What is an issue or a struggle or a tension that's been a long-term part of your journey with Jesus? Can anybody identify sort of a long-term struggle or issue that you've had to wrestle with, or tension that's just been a pretty consistent part of your journey with Jesus? Jane, I can't hear you. Doesn't look like you're muted.
I'll take a little risk and be brutally honest.
Okay.
Jesus' masculinity and how it spills over onto our understanding of who God is and even who people are. I mean, I have struggled with that for 40 years at least. God is not. God is Jesus somehow. And yet God is not a male persona. And I, it's one thing to know that intellectually and grasp it. And it's another thing to live with it. Several of you in this group know that I really struggle with the male dominant language for God that pervades our churches. Just absolutely, God is a he in our prayers, in our conversation, in our imagery. God is a he. God is, well, in my image of God, God is not a he. God is not a she either necessarily, but God is something different. And I think we mess up our the depth of what it means to know God when we continue to use language. And I've watched, the Penelope and Andrew's boys, because this is, I think, as hurtful to boys as it is to girls. Growing up, again and again and again and again, 1,000 times, 100,000 times, God is he. I'll be still now.
Okay. Yeah, thank you, Jane. So there might be theological tensions or questions that are a long-term part of our journey with Jesus. Anything else come to anybody's mind as you think about tensions, struggles, issues that have been with you for a good part of the journey? Okay, let me, so we're doing just a brief overview of how Nouwen answers that question. So this is Henry Nouwen, a Catholic priest, in a book called Spiritual Formation, which in many ways is a summary of a lot of his writing. He wrote many books and articles And this book is almost a summary of bringing together of 7 of the major themes that he wrote about over his life. So what Nouwen does in this book is he frames our journey with Jesus as a set of movements or polarities, and we never complete them. So these are not stages. We never move beyond them. Each one of these polarities or tensions, issues or struggles is always a part of every season of life. But in one season, one of these may be more of a struggle than something else. And when we go to another season of life, another one of these 7 may become more of a struggle, and what we were struggling with before may sort of move to the background. So let me just introduce this just to kind of get it in your head, and then we'll be moving in detail through each of these in the next few Wednesdays. So 7 moves, 7 polarities, according to Nouwen. The first one is from what he calls opaqueness to transparency. So this is the tension between not seeing or not experiencing or not understanding God, and seeing or experiencing and understanding God. It's a difference between blindness and sight, not understanding and understanding, or what the language that others might use would be disenchantment, the sense that I don't know where God is, I don't know what God's doing, and enchantment. Oh, I see God everywhere. God's all over the place. So that's a tension and a movement that we hold for much of our journey. Move 2, the move from illusion to prayer. What he means by that is the tension between believing that there are things that are in our control, that's the illusion, and prayerfully surrendering control to God. So we're constantly battling with issues of control. What's in my control? What needs to be surrendered to God? Move 3, and we'll come back to all of these. Move 3 is the move from sorrow to joy, the tension between lamenting loss and disappointment on the one hand, and finding reasons for joy on the other hand. So, this is an everyday kind of struggle. Move 4, resentment to gratitude, the tension between the bitterness of unmet needs and hopes or unjust treatment and the experience of abiding gratitude. So that, in some seasons of life, we find ourselves bitter. In other seasons of life, we find ourselves more easily filled with gratitude. Move 5, the move from fear to love. This is specifically the tension between fearing the other, fear of other people, and fearing the future, what if, and then on the other hand, having a true and peace-filled love for all people. Move 6, the move from exclusion to inclusion. This is the tension between rejecting others and accepting others. And then the last one, move 7, denying death to befriending death. So this is the tension between ignoring death or fighting death and peacefully accepting the reality of death. So we'll walk through each of those in the next few weeks, and we'll touch on number 1 tonight. But that at least gives you a sense of where Nouwen will go with this material. And these slides will be on the website if you'd like to access them. All right, so let's finish up the circle by Hagberg and Gulick. And we're in stage 5. So I'll just walk through these last 2 stages basically. Stage 5 is the journey outward. Some of the characteristics of stage 5, a renewed sense of God's acceptance. So we grow into the full awareness that God truly loves us, even though we're never fully whole. Wholeness looks a lot like weakness at this stage. It doesn't make us stronger, but it allows God to work through our weakness. So we carry some of the scars and injuries from the wall with us as we move into stage 5. Number 2, a new sense of the horizontal life. Stage 4 and the wall often focus on the vertical life, and especially doubts that we may have about God and how he sees us and how God works in the world. And stage 5 sort of returns to also thinking about the horizontal life and the world around us and our role in that world. There's a sense of calling, vocation, and ministry here in stage 5, which makes it similar to stage 3, the productive life. But now there's a deeper call to vocation and ministry that's not coming from a mentor or a group or a cause, but something from deep within. There's a sense of identity now that's driving our desire to serve. Fourth characteristic, a concern and focus on others' best interests. So winning and productivity, which can be a real part of stage 3, are no longer important. We don't burn ourselves out. We don't burn out at this stage. We know ourselves well enough to avoid emotionally draining situations or jobs. So there's a sort of recovery of self-care now in this stage, especially having been at the wall and all the difficulties there. And then a fifth characteristic, a deep calm or stillness, a new longing to simply be in the presence of God's fullness, where we let God be God and we're not struggling against him so much anymore. Each of these stages have cages that can potentially keep us from moving on. So the authors of this book argue that really in stage 5 and 6, there are no true cages, just things that other people, when they're looking in at our lives, they might see some things that think are, I don't know, unhealthy. So for example, in stage 5, other people looking at our life at this stage might think that we're out of touch with practical concerns because we're no longer interested in winning and we're no longer interested in just, constant productivity. Others may look at us and think, well, they're not doing anything. They're too inactive. They're too idle. They need to be more productive, right? Or apparent carelessness about important things. So it's in stage 5 where there's sort of a sense of indifference in a good way. We're not striving so hard to do and to be the very best. And so others may look at us and think, well, gosh, they don't seem to care about anything. But in reality, we just don't care about the things that are unhealthy anymore. And we care about the things that are truly healthy. And then that moves really quickly into stage 6, the life of love, which is the goal or the destination. So these authors would argue biblically where God is trying to get us to is a life of love, where we should be striving to move through this whole thing is a life of love. So some characteristics of this, Christ-like living in total obedience to God. We have little ambition for being well-known, rich, successful, noteworthy, goal-oriented, or spiritual, which those are all sort of characteristics of stage 2 and 3. Some of the superficiality that we have early in our spiritual life. Now we're just trying to be obedient. We're just trying to live out the way of Christ, the life of love. Second, wisdom gained from life struggles. Now, when we experience pain, it may tire us or anger us, but we're able to learn from it. So we've really grown in our ability to deal with the pain that is constantly part of the journey, but we get wiser through it. A third characteristic of stage 6, a life of love, compassionate living for others. We reach far beyond our own capacity and love others with deep compassion, because we know that all come from and are loved by God. And so the authors would say that when you reach stage 6, you find yourself being able to love in ways that you never really imagined that you could. Whereas, back in stage 2 and stage 3, there are often limits to our love for lots of different reasons. But now we find ourselves just sort of overflowing with love. And fourth characteristic, detachment from things and stress. We become aware that the more of God we have, the less of everything else we need. And then fifth, life underneath or on top. So now we're free to do whatever God asks, whether it's menial or prestigious. Doesn't matter to us. We can step into any task that we sense God calling us to, and nothing's too menial, and we're not afraid of doing things that are in the limelight either, as long as that's what God is calling us to do. A couple of cages here: neglect of self. Other people may look at our single-hearted devotion to love in this stage and fear that we're not taking care of ourselves. But in stage 5, there is kind of this recovery of self-care, and that continues on to stage 6. We realize that in order to love, we also have to love ourselves. And then number 2, apparent waste of life. Others may look at our single-hearted devotion and fear that we're wasting our lives. We're not doing what the world thinks is important to do. Okay, so let's just stop there. Look at the whole circle there, the stages that we've walked through, including tonight. Which, if any of those stages feel important to you, and or what stage would you say that you're in right now?
Chris, this is John. I feel like, yeah, I'm probably in stage 5, but I'm appreciative of what I learned in stages 1, 2, 3, and 4.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever the wall was in my life, I'm grateful for it.
Mm. Good. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm surprised in going through all this how accurately this does describe my spiritual life.
Mm.
I feel like it is very accurate. And I also feel like I am in stage 5.
Mm. Okay.
Looking forward to being in stage 6, working on it, but in stage 5.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, it seems like there's a little bit of an overlap, I'll say, with my sense of where I am in my career.
Oh, yeah.
Well, in terms of, getting a little closer to retirement and just the sense of, of urgency about, everything that I've, done in my work life. And it kind of parallels your spiritual, it just seems like as you age, these are the things that happen.
Mm.
Over
Mhm.
time in a lot of different of your pursuits, in terms of just trying to find meaning. And of course, it's good to have a relationship with God to go to in these places where you're thinking it's not about designing bridges anymore. It's just not. I think clearly we all have a sense of that as Christians prior to that, but so it just seems like a cycle of life thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. I think these transitions that we go through in our lives will have a definite impact on kind of where we feel like we are on this in this model, for sure.
It's kind of hard to imagine any 30-year-old in stage 5.
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to stage 6, but I'm not in a rush.
I think that's the beauty of having a multi-generational church, because I've had some really great stage 6ers in my life that I've like gone to and saw and see modeled, and there's this calmness.
Mm-hmm.
I think of J.G. Pinkerton and other people of that generation that have
Mm-hmm.
experienced and seen a lot of things, and they can talk to you in a way that you realize that okay, Gulf War broke out, the sun will rise tomorrow.
Mm.
And you know that they know that because they've been through some stuff. And I think as each of us go through our stages, then we can look to those at later stages and look to those at earlier stages and sort of, speak to each other and say it's all going to be okay.
Mhm. Yeah, that's good.
We need each other's experience, and
Yeah.
we need each other's narrative, to help, give people an idea that, it's okay. It's a process here.
Mhm.
I think I find myself going back and forth between stages 4 and 5. And interestingly, there's the wall in between. And I think it's actually a comfort to know that that's where the wall is. So it's a tough place to be, either at stage 4, on stage 5, or somewhere in between. But I don't see it as going linearly back and forth, or tangentially, I guess, back and forth. It's almost like as you go through the wall, you sort of diagonally move up the spoke. So even though I'm going back and forth, you're working yourself outward, which if I'm looking at that picture, the wall is shorter. So maybe you can, it's not that you'll skip the wall, but that you'll be a better master of going through or over the wall, however you want to think about it. And eventually, that'll assist you in that spring towards stage 6. And at any one time in life, I could be in 4 and 5, and then all of a sudden I'll be like, whoa, I'm finding myself in 2, fast track back to 2. So that's the way I sort of feel where I am.
Yeah, good.
I'm going.
Yes, Jane, can't hear you.
Yeah. An old Episcopal church educator named John Westerhoff, who I suppose is long gone by now. But he also, everybody talks about these stages of faith. Everybody's got a scheme and similar and sometimes different. But the insight Westerhoff offered to me that I really picked up on it is wow, stage 1 is just as valuable and just as precious and just as and this kind of goes back to Eddie's comment, yes, we look at the people in stage 1. I want to also look at people in stages 1 and 2 for their energy, for their passion, for their enthusiasm, for their and Westerhoff talks about, it doesn't matter how many rings the tree has. I mean, if you have 6 rings and you're at stage 6, then that's great. But if you have 2 rings, you're still a tree, and you are still, a great.
Yeah.
And so when Eddie was speaking, it reminded me of this, that every stage has its wisdom, its contributions, its gifts. And no matter what stage we're in, we can learn from people in every other stage, I believe.
Yeah, that's good. I appreciate that. Yeah. I mean, a community that never has anybody in stage 1 is much poorer, because we need that newness, that sense of awe and wonder that comes from people in stage 1. Okay, good. So I hope that this model is helpful just in terms of giving you language, some way of visualizing your journey, and that you'll come back to this and let it be part of the way that you sort of make sense of where you are and where you're headed. So we're going to move on to now. And so for the rest of our Wednesday nights in this little mini session, we'll just be in these polarities here. So we're moving not only to a different author, but to a different way of thinking about the Christian journey. These stage theories sort of lead us to think about it as we hit this stage, then we move to this stage, then we move to this stage. And now and in others present something very different. When we think of polarities or tensions, we're never quite through with any of them. So all of these tensions stay with us. There's nothing sequential about them. It's not like we have to go from opaqueness transparency before we can go from fear to love. These are all sort of the holy mess of life with God, and they manifest themselves differently in different seasons of life. So in Nouwen's collected works, there are 26 of these movements, but these 7 in this book, Spiritual Formation, were the ones that were most often repeated. So you can be thankful that we're not doing 26 movements. We're just doing 7 in this book. Okay, so here they are again, 7 movements or polarities. They stay with us throughout the Christian life. And the little meter here, almost even daily, we might be, saying, oh gosh, today I'm over here on this one, and today I'm over here on this one, and I'm all the way on joy on this one. So these little dials might change on a daily, weekly, monthly, yearly basis. But basically what Nouwen would say is that we have to learn to manage these tensions. So, and there is tension with each of these, and tension is hard. It's challenging, but we learn to manage that tension. So we start with number 1, and we'll finish up with this tonight, the move from opaqueness to transparency. So just a couple of quotes here and then some scriptures. So in terms of opaqueness, Nouwen writes, the contemplative life is a life in which we constantly move from opaqueness to transparency, from the place where things are dark, thick, impenetrable, and closed, to the place where the same things are translucent, open, and offer vision for beyond themselves. For those who pray from the heart, the world loses its opaqueness and becomes transparent. That is, the world of experience starts pointing beyond itself to the luminous source of wisdom and understanding, to the translucent realm of the Spirit of God. To contemplate is to see, to make visible that which is hidden from ordinary sight. The contemplative is someone who sees things for what they really are, who sees the real connections of how things hang together, who knows, as Thomas Merton used to say, what the scoop is. And then in terms of transparency, so I'm taking the whole chapter here and just reducing it to a few quotes. To attain such a vision, spiritual discipline is necessary. Evagrius, an ancient early Christian writer, calls this discipline the praktiki, the taking away of blindfolds that prevent us from seeing clearly. The Spirit of God shows us how to move continuously from opaqueness to transparency in 3 central relationships: our relationship with nature, time, and people. So nature, when we relate to the trees, the rivers, the mountains, the fields, and the oceans as objects that we can use according to our real or fabricated needs, nature is opaque and doesn't reveal to us its true being. When we contemplate creation rather than manipulating it, we are able to see nature as a gift of God to be cherished and cared for. And then time, when we experience time as chronology, the events of our life are nothing more than a randomly connected series of incidents and accidents over which we have no control. Time has become opaque, dark, impenetrable. We can't see to the underlying coherence of our story. Time needs to be converted from chronos to kairos, an opportunity for a change of heart. The spiritual life is a formation process in which time slowly loses its opaqueness and becomes transparent. To start seeing that the many events of our day, week, or year are not obstacles to a full and meaningful life, but are the way to it, is a real experience of conversion. And then people. Our society makes it difficult for us to see people as transparent because we're conditioned to relate to persons as characters, to use as we need or want. We generalize and label people in religious circles. We often divide people into 2 camps. Labeling is always limiting. Our spiritual task is to resist the temptation to box our fellow human beings into figures and characters and to see them as rather as persons who sound through to a greater reality than they themselves fully know. Okay, so what he's getting at in this chapter, in this move, is similar to what we read about in John chapter 9. You remember the story where there's a man born blind, and then Jesus heals the person that's been born blind, and then there's this controversy. Jesus gets taken to task for the healing. And so we pick up this text in John 9, verse 35. The young man that's been healed has been cast out by the Pharisees. So Jesus heard that they had cast him out, and having found him, he said, "Do you believe in the Son of Man?" And he answered, "And who is he, sir, that I may believe in him?" Jesus said to him, "You have seen him, and it is he who is speaking to you." He said, "Lord, I believe," and he worshiped him. Jesus said, "For judgment I came into this world, that those who do not see may see, and those who see may become blind." Some of the Pharisees near him heard these things and said to him, "Are we also blind?" Jesus said to them, "If you were blind, you would have no guilt. But now that you say we see, your guilt remains." And the whole text there is this fun, playful banter between seeing and not seeing, being blind and filled with sight. And the person that was blind is actually the one that sees, and the Pharisees who see are actually the ones who are blind. And that's what now it's talking about here, that in all sorts of different areas of our life, we're at one of these or the other. We're blind and we can't really see what God's doing or what God's trying to show us, or we're experiencing transparency where, oh yeah, we see what God's up to. We see what he's trying to do here. And this tension becomes a part of lots of parts of our lives. Another text that we might think about here is Psalm 139. "O Lord, you searched me and know me. You know when I sit down and when I rise up, you discern my thoughts from afar. You search out my path and my lying down and are acquainted with all my ways. Even before a word is on my tongue, behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. You hem me in behind and before and lay your hand upon me." So Psalm 139 is written by somebody who's moved all the way almost as far as you go to transparency. And David, now says, well, everywhere I go, there you are. I see you, I see God in every place and everything that I'm involved with. And then one last text where this really is being played out is in the story of Esther. So Esther chapter 4. Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, "Do not think to yourself that in the king's palace you will escape any more than all the other Jews. For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not come to the kingdom for such a time as this." So Mordecai is able to look at all of the messiness that's been happening in the kingdom of Persia, and everything that's all the pain that Esther has gone through, and he's able to say, essentially, God's been at work here. He's been at work getting you to this place so that you can save the Jewish people. And he's in this area of transparency instead of opaqueness, and he's trying to get Esther out of opaqueness, out of blindness, to a place of transparency where she too can say, okay, yeah, this is the work of God. God's placed me here and I want to be obedient to him. So that's the tension that now is getting at here. So these, you might think about these questions. What are some things that remain unclear or hidden or mysterious to you in this season of your life? In other words, where do you experience opaqueness? Or what are some things on which you've reached increasing clarity and insight in this season of your life? Where are some places of transparency where you're realizing, oh, that's what God's doing here? In what ways are you able to see God's presence and activity in your life? and world, which is a question of transparency. So we'll stop there. We got a couple minutes. What does any of that resonate with you? This idea of opaqueness to transparency, these reflection questions. Anybody want to touch on any of those?
I think as a parent, there's more opaqueness in my world in terms of where my children are heading, what their future will be. I feel that my life is pretty transparent when it comes to my fate, but when it comes to theirs, a lot of questions still. I have faith that it's going to be fine, but I wish it were a little more clear.
That's a good example, John. Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
I was going to say that, just the realization with the number 2 about clarity that we don't, as far as, our own children's like health, that we really don't have any control. And learning to trust is just where I am.
Good. Thank you, Penny. Okay, we'll finish there. So I invite you to think about this first move, opaqueness to transparency. Kind of take that with you through the rest of the week and see how it helps frame some things for you. So thank you, everybody, for being with us tonight, for all your
Thanks,
comments.
Chris. Thank you.
Chris.
Have a good evening, everybody.